Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Fringe North podcast. I'm Caitlin. I am the project coordinator for this year's festival, and I have with me here today Jaydon Bird. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience, Jaydon, and just share a little bit about yourself and your work?
For sure. No, thank you for that brief introduction. But yeah, as you said, I'm Jaydon. I'm an actor and comedian, sort of a double threat, if you will. I just like to combine the two together to create what I create. And I am from Sydney, Australia, so a couple of kilometers down the road. But yeah, wanted to put my hand out into the international sphere and show you guys some content, yeah, across the pond as well.
It's super exciting. So, when did you first get into this sphere, and what is your background within it as
I think professionally, I'd probably say, or at least when I say professionally, I mean dedicating time to it intentionally. It'd probably be about 2 years. But in saying that, like I've been making skits, just between me and my friends for years. I went to university, started university back in 2016, and had a group of guys there. We had our own radio show, and we'd do all sorts of fantastical things on there and crack jokes across the airwaves. And that sort of morphed into me doing my own video work while at uni as well, Snapchat stories and putting two little
well?
Facebook posts up here and there. And then eventually wanted to start my own podcast, similar to the one you guys got here today, where I just chat to people and have a bit of a yarn about what they're interested in. And that sort of led into me creating a space to put my sketch humor out there as well. So yeah, it's been about 2 years since I started doing that. I got into acting professionally at the end of last year in September. So all in all, yeah, I'd say about 2 years. Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds
and
like a. Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, and I think because you had a second part of that question being why did I get into it? I guess it's always just been an enjoyment, right? Which the story speaks for itself to say, if I've always been doing it, there's been something in it for me beside the pay, besides the content itself. It's just been for the love of it, right? And so yeah, to be able to do that in a more professional space with others that are going to be aligned with that too. Yeah, it's brought me a lot of enjoyment, and so I've just taken the ball and ran with it.
It's awesome. It sounds like you have a very diverse background in terms of this radio show and podcasts and film content as well. It's a little bit of everything, which is really exciting and unique. So, I guess looking at all those different spheres, what do you feel is the space that speaks most to you in all those different art forms?
It's a great question. Hey, I love the art of communication. I feel like I was an anxious child, and so I never really developed in that space as fully as I could going through school, and that was probably insecurities and stuff growing into my own confidence. But all these spheres has some form of communication where radio show you're talking amongst individuals, a podcast you're talking pretty much like we are now, and sketch humor you're conveying an idea to the audience through a visual lens and also through the apparatus of humor too, and that can be very poignant in itself, right? You can really make an impact with doing things like that, whether it is just a joke or it's that's how satire develops, right? And etc. etc. I don't feel like I play much into that sphere, but the biggest thing for me out of all of them is probably that expression, which art's all about, right? It's the ability to express ourselves through a medium, and they're so diverse as well. I'm sure you have people on here that are going to paint and dance and sing, and they're beautiful areas. But for me, I suppose being able to, yeah, express myself uh, outwardly in all these different spheres. They all have their pros and cons, for lack of a better phrase, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, I'd have to say the communication element, or the ability to express myself through different mediums of communication is.
Oh, your audio has dropped.
On my back. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yep. Sorry
Sorry
about
about
that. My internet, Australian internet. Sorry, guys.
that.
But yeah, to wrap it up, it's yeah. So essentially, communication through expression, which all of my mediums that I enjoy and that I'm now involved in have to some certain extent.
Yeah, so with all of this diverse different areas, why did you land on like sketch comedy? There's so many different avenues for comedy, so I'm curious
Mm.
as to what led you to that one specifically.
No, that's a great question. I guess it combines the two element. It combines acting with humor, right? And so they're both two things that I've always sort of thought, oh, which one would I go for? And a lot of people that are involved in the stand-up scene will say it can be more of an act than just being up on stage, being myself. But I'm someone that prides myself in speaking authentically, and so to transition that to a stage element, that the lines of what's me and what's an act sort of become a little bit blurred to me. And at this stage in my journey, it's like I don't think I'd have a great handle on that. You know what I mean? Whereas I can tell once the camera starts rolling and I'm wearing a costume, I'm like, this isn't me. So I can really have fun with that character, and really develop the story and have the punchline in mind as a sort of like a mission rather than, hey, like what part of me is in this and what part's the character. That the lines are a lot more segmented, and on top of that, it's just a lot of fun as well. you
Mhm.
know yeah, you can do character work on stage, but it's a live expression rather than me being able to, at this stage, at least my journey, because I'm quite fresh to the industry, is like I can set it to record, and if the take's not good, I can do it again. I can do it 100 times over
Mm.
until I'm happy with what it is. And I have to have that ability to, use props and use costumes and use settings and really dive into the depths of any story I want to tell, even if it is just a 15-second skit of me, I don't know, peeling potatoes or something. It's all that came to mind. But yeah, there's a
So
lot more depth to it.
So how do you approach that storytelling process, especially when it is such small clips? I know some of your content's longer as well, but what is your approach to telling those stories?
You have to start with a punchline because it's humor. Without the punchline, it's just a story, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's essentially what acting is, right? You can act in a drama, and there's going to be no, yeah, punchline at all potentially. But with doing sketch comedy, there has to be some sort of punchline. And for those that aren't really sure what a punchline is, or I'm sure most of you have some idea, it's like the butt of a joke. But all you can think of is like something that you find funny. So I'll think of something in my life, or I'll cross something in my life that I find humorous in some sort of way, and I'll go, right, what about that's funny? Like, can I sort of develop that in some sort of way to create a sketch from? And sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. Sometimes to pick why things are funny, right? They just there's probably a deeper reason to it, but we can't really put a finger on to say why it's funny. Sometimes things are just so silly and absurd that you go, it's just so far from the normal that this makes me laugh. And there's humor there too, right? It's absurdism. But for me, it's like, yeah, picking something that I can find humor in and going, okay, this thing makes me laugh. Why does it make me laugh? And how can I use that thing to turn it into a sketch that would make others laugh and make myself laugh, being another person as well, right? I think all of my skits, once I've made them, I'll watch it back, and like I'm my own biggest fan, right? So I'll have a laugh at whatever I've created, and yeah, it feels like a labor of love. You know what I mean? I cherish them all as well to be like my little bubbers. But yeah, if you can laugh at it yourself and you can translate that, or if I can translate that over to the medium of film, then yeah, I usually just take that and run with it and see what happens on camera.
So what makes your skits unique from others, and what sets you apart from others within the industry?
Well, because you're a Canadian enterprise, I don't think you're going to have probably many Australians jumping on, which is why I have called my show. So that's what Australians call humour, because again, humour being subjective, you might have some people that watch my sketch comedy for the half hour and go, this ain't funny. But hey, I've had many Australians tell me that my humour is great. So that's why I've decided on that name. I suppose in my own locality, that's not going to really set me apart because every man and his dog's Australian, for lack of a better praise, or they're at least here, right? So they're submerged in the culture. Um, but I do bring, like you said before, being involved in a different number of ways of expressing myself artistically. I can bring those to the table. I've had quite a diverse background in terms of just my life in general. Starting off as a fairly intelligent kid in school, I was raised in an academic environment, encouraged in those areas until I got to the end of my schooling career and went, geez, 12 years of that was enough. I went into like a trade school and ventured down that for a couple of years, and so I've seen it at different shades of life and submerged in different communities to give me background on different walks of life. You know, it's one of the big reasons I made my podcast, because there's so many diverse people out there, and we're all characters in some sort of way, right? And that's one thing that did inspire me as well, to go, well, you know, you can create your own characters too, right? I'm a character in myself, and from that I can develop skits, and some of them, sometimes those are funny. So yeah.
Exciting. So, what can fringe goers expect from your content this year, and what do you think they might enjoy about it?
Hopefully everything. And hopefully a laugh, right? That's the point of comedy. It's you know, that's the long and short of it. um I've included a fairly, again, a fairly wide variety of the different styles that I do, I suppose. Some are going to be more specific to the culture, but again, I've tried to get a good balance between things that a Canadian audience is still going to find funny, but also integrating like that Australian culture into it. So there are going to be parts where, you know, for example, one of the skits that I've got lined up that I know, I've put out there in the sphere already, but this one is essentially, it's an impression reel, but it's centered around a major hardware company here in Australia, which is, it's kind of a cultural phenomenon, right? This company, because they have sausage sizzles on a Sunday, and they're synonymous with hardware in Australia. But for a Canadian watching it, they're going to go, oh, you know, what the hell's Bunnings, eh? It's like, well, you know, I'm going to keep that in there, but because it's sort of, you can still get that the impressions are entertaining, but you're also getting a little bit of a taste of, again, what Australians call humor. So
Mhm. Yeah, so sharing that cultural background that you have and that you bring to the table, which is
hmm
really exciting. Um,
hmm
so, in terms of Canadians who have never engaged with anyone from Australia before, if you were to summarize like what that humor is and put it into words, how would you summarize that, and how would you explain that to someone without actually showing a skit, but to explain in words?
yeah, that's a really good question. We've got an expression here down under. It's called being a larrikin. And a larrikin is essentially kind of like a jester, right? Like a sort of, you know, whimsical oath, but it's more of a, I mean, everyone's probably seen Crocodile Dundee, right? And how sort of Australian, he's like sort of the outback, g'day mate, how you going, sort of thing, you know. And that's sort of what a larrikin is, but a larrikin is a more mischievous version of your typical Aussie that people perceive in the mainstream media, you know. So you do have those Crocodile Dundees, and I don't know who else is a prominent Australian figure in that space. I mean, you got your actors like your Chris Hemsworth and your Hugh Jackmans, and if anyone's seen, you know, interviews with them rather than the characters they play, because they mainly play, you know, in American movies, and so they develop through that culture. But to see their interviews too, and something you experience fairly widely, I'd say, to Australia here, is we're quite a friendly bunch. You know, we're quite genuine. We're down to earth. We have a saying that we call a spade, which means just calling it as you see it. Um, yeah, there's, I don't want to spoil too much from
Mm.
the layout of the half an hour that I'm doing. But some of the things that set us apart is, I think, our worth ethic as well. We can be typically hard workers, you know, or we call it hard yakka. So you're learning some of the Aussie slang as well. Yak is just another word for work. So there's that element of us, but we also are a quite a party centric culture. You know what I mean? We love to go to the pub after work and have a few beers. So I've included those sort of two elements there. We've got a lot of love for our family, a lot of love for our country, a lot of love for our communities. So I've included that there as well. And yeah, it's tricky to jump that cultural gap in terms of what can I say that's going to paint a picture best for someone that's not familiar with all these things.
Mhm.
But to put it most simply, I'd say, yeah, we pride ourselves in our genuineness, trying to be as down to earth as possible. You know, having a good solid crack at most things, it just means having a go, which just, you know, I think you guys have that expression, having a go at something, just like having a red hot go. like
I'm
applying
not good with
yourself to the
expression,
task.
but I think so.
Applying yourself to a task as fervently as you can is the best way to explain that one. But yeah, those two things, and then just having love from that as well. You know, because we're quite a loving bunch. I'd like to think as well. I mean, you get all sorts, right? It's not a stock standard, but if I could describe Australians and then what inspired me to come to this in terms of a representative of that culture, those are the things that I keep in mind with selecting these skits and putting it in the format that it's going to be in as well.
Nice. What are you most excited for about the Fringe this year, and what are you looking forward to?
Um, I think jumping that international abyss is a good step out of my comfort zone for me. It's probably the first time that I've also created a longer format piece of content. This is by far, aside from my podcast, which are quite long form themselves, but in terms of the comedy area of my production, it's definitely the longest form that I've done, and so that excites me to try to integrate these forms of content in ways that is going to be more streamlined than just skit 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 skit. And it's kind of like, well, how can I get all of these things to flow a little bit better, right, and create a proper almost like a variety show or a sketch show
Mhm.
out of it too. So that's been really exciting, and then just the ability to put my content out there, to have people that are thousands of kilometers away viewing what I've made primarily in my own backyard, really. Yeah, it's quite exciting, that technology side of it as well.
Yeah, for
Mm.
sure. Yeah, and it's amazing, the opportunity that it affords us to have a digital festival this year and have all these different voices. We have a couple different places represented, so I'm really excited about the festival this year and just the diversity of different countries that are involved. So is there anything that you would like to share with viewers about why they should attend your show and why they should support you by buying tickets and uh, any piece like that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, all I'd say is, so that's what I've called it. So that's what Australians call humour. If you like to have a laugh and you're curious about Australian culture, then this is for you. You know, if anything, you'll get half an hour where you might have a cheeky giggle at moments at me just being an oaf, or you might be laughing the whole way. And again, humour is quite a subjective thing, right? But you don't know unless you give it a try. So if you put yourself out there and go, hey, it's half an hour, ticket's going to cost less than a coffee does. Put yourself down on the list, come along, check out what Australians call humor, and maybe it's what Canadians call humor as well, and we can jump that bridge and really connect on an international level.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on our podcast today and for your time. And we're really excited to have you part of the festival this year. And yeah, it's just great to have the involvement across the globe.
No,
Uh,
it's
so
great to be a part of it.
So thank you to all of our viewers for watching and checking in. Miigwech, merci, and gracias. And tune into the festival. It's going to be running from August 19th to the 22nd. Buy your tickets, come out, support artists from across the globe and all over the place. So
See
thank you
you
for
all over
tuning in.
there.
Thank you for your time and have a great day. Thank you for watching our podcast. Merci, miigwech, gracias. If you like what we're doing, you can support Fringe North and the artists involved in this year's festival financially so that we can continue this work. Visit www.fringenorth.ca to find out more.